I studied the liberal arts, changed my life. Now I teach the liberal arts. I'm changing lives. Am I changing lives? I'm making people read a lot of books. Books change lives, but a liberal arts degree can change your life. I'm going to talk about that. Here's what we're doing. It's almost the end of July, which means it's almost the start of August, which for a university professor like me, it means like it's time to get going. Once August gets here, there's a real vibe shift. See, in May and June, like late spring, early summer, all things are possible. Once we hit August, we got to get down to brass tacks. It's almost the start of a new year. And so I thought, okay, I'm halfway through. I'm doing 10 weeks of weekly chats, and I thought we're kind of at the midway point. This would be a good time to kind of, get my head right for a new year. And I think to do that, you want to recommit to the mission. What's the goal? What are we doing here? Reading all these books, writing all these papers. And hey, training camp started this week. Go Birds. Almost back to school, almost football season. So I thought it would be fitting, kind of a midsummer liberal arts training camp, get your mind right video. So let's talk about the liberal arts and what they're good for. So the liberal arts, traditionally have been understood. The liberal in liberal arts is about liberty, right? This is the education that sets you free. And how does this education set you free? It sets you free by opening your mind. And the way that the liberal arts liberate, I think there's sort of two ways it happens. One is that you're just exposed to new ideas, new ways of seeing the world. You read books you've never heard about, you encounter thinkers you've never heard about, and they see the world differently. And that opens your mind to new ways of understanding things. It alerts you to problems or issues you've never thought about before. But the other thing that's just as important, I think a liberal arts education can explain to you why you think the things you think. You may think certain things because you were born in a certain time in a certain place. And so the liberal arts encourages you to subject these ideas that you have, these opinions that you hold, to subject them to scrutiny, to analyze them, to critically think about them. Are the things I believe actually true? And it would seem, you would think, given that this is what the liberal arts are, everybody would be in favor. Everybody should love the liberal arts. But a lot of people really don't like the liberal arts. If you are a liberal arts major, you've probably heard the jokes. Your uncle, your friend who takes engineering or business marketing or whatever, what are you going to do with that? If you like working in fast food, it's just a waste of time and money. All those people are wrong, and I'm going to explain why. First, it's important to understand that critiques of liberal thinking, liberal arts thinking, are as old as the liberal arts are themselves. We can go all the way back to Socrates, right? 2,500 years ago. And there's a reason why Socrates is kind of the patron saint of the liberal arts, because here was someone who encouraged his fellow citizens to think critically about the positions they held. Socrates encouraged people to ask questions, to question the gods, to question things like justice and beauty and wisdom. What was the most important thing in life? These were the things that Socrates wanted to know about. And he engaged lots of rich and powerful and influential people in conversations about these things. And he aggravated and irritated a lot of experts when he exposed that they had not put much thought into the things they claimed to be experts about. And so they executed him. And so in some ways, the moral of this story, I think, is that I take it this in Plato telling the story about Socrates over and over again, these various stories about Socrates. I think part of what he wants to illuminate for us is that there is always this fundamental tension between philosophy and politics. And what that means is that a degree like the liberal arts, which is designed to turn you into a question asker, into someone who questions the accepted wisdom, someone who looks for better ways of doing things, who sees things differently, that kind of a person, that kind of an enterprise is always going to be a bit at odds with the prevailing power structure. Now, within a healthy democracy, this kind of education and the government, the regime, can exist in a kind of dynamic, productive tension with each other. In theory, a democracy thrives on people who are free thinkers, asking questions, looking for different ways of solving problems all the time. That energizes a democracy. So if you are a liberal arts major or a wannabe liberal arts major, or if you're just a philosophical soul who likes to think about these things and ask questions, understand that if people are critical of you and your choices, then you are a part of this long tradition. You are in good company. But let me respond for a few minutes to some of these criticisms of the liberal arts. I'm going to tackle the main one first, this thing about jobs and usefulness. So first of all, it's simply an exaggeration. It's not at all true that people who take liberal arts degrees don't get jobs. I know from my own friends, my own students, that they get all kinds of jobs. A lot of people still think about jobs like they did when they were like 4. What are you going to be when you grow up? A firefighter, a policeman, a construction worker. Those aren't the only jobs. I think a lot of people think, well, if you take an engineering degree, then you become an engineer. If you take a computer science degree, then you become an IT specialist. A business degree means you work in business. And there's no job that's a liberal artist. That's not a job. It's kind of my job. It's sort of like my job. But for the most part, it's not a real job. And it is actually difficult for those of us in the liberal arts to say to students, well, this is what you will be when you get out. But it's not because there's nothing you can do with the degree. It's the opposite. It's that there's so many things you could do and you could be. When I just think of my students are teachers, they're social workers, they're lawyers. They work in IT. Some of them work in urban planning and public policy. They work for government. They work for nonprofits. They work in fields like natural resources and public safety. People who work in journalism. People who work in theater. There are so many things you can do. And the reason you can do that is because in the liberal arts, you learn these highly transferable skills. So you learn things like how to communicate, how to speak, how to write, how to think critically. My students might spend time. We might be reading a poem in a class 4 days. And from a certain perspective, well, that seems useless. But part of what's happening while we're doing that, students are developing their powers of interpretation. They're looking at a very complicated piece of text and trying to pull an argument out of it. And then they're advancing that argument. Then someone else is qualifying that argument. So they're modifying what they think. They're putting together collaboratively an interpretation of this text. That means they're working as a team to solve a problem. They're voicing their ideas. They are listening to other people. That is an important skill. At the same time, they are deepening their understanding of culture, of literature, of history, of art, of religion, of philosophy. They are learning all of these things at once. And all of those skills can be transferred into a wide variety of careers. So for the people who think every liberal arts grad is going to end up broke, they can shut up. I try to be nice. I try to be friendly. I'm generally pretty friendly. But here's the thing. This is a thing that drives me crazy. Can I tell you something that drives me crazy? Regularly, I read on social media or I read online these arguments about how there's this distinction between useful subjects and useless subjects. So studying computers is useful and studying poetry is useless. Studying engineering is useful. Studying history is useless. And it's such a... Here's the thing. First of all, useful to whom? Very quickly, we're in this position where we're saying that employers should dictate to communities what the educational priorities are, right? Employers want this skill. Teach young people how to do this. And that, to me, is a potentially slavish way to think about education, right? That big companies, corporations, should tell people what they need to learn so that they are useful to big companies. That's backwards. When we fixate only on the economy, right? And this return on investment idea. If that's the only thing we're thinking about, we've lost the plot. Because the purpose of your life is not to boost economic productivity. That's not the purpose of your life. And look, I'm not saying to heck with employable skills. It's important to acquire acquire some life skills and some employable skills. I just enumerated a number of these skills that people develop when they're reading poetry, for example. And I think universities and professors that we can do a better job helping our students understand how the skills that they are developing when they're reading philosophy or studying history apply in different contexts. Absolutely, we can do a better job of that. And look, this brings me to another defense, another reason why we need the liberal arts. Another reason why, if you love studying this stuff, that you should feel good about yourself, that we need people to study this stuff. We don't need everybody to be an expert in these things. You don't need everybody to be an expert in constitutional law, but you need some people to be experts in constitutional law. And for me, this is the more potent argument about the liberal arts, and it's about the public good. We need journalists and teachers and policymakers. We need people who understand history and religion and ethics and economics. I mean, just go online. Doesn't it seem like people need to know more about history? Doesn't it seem like people need to understand the basic principles of how government works? Even spelling would be good. One of the problems I think we run into in the contemporary world is that we get kind of confused by prosperity. See, prosperity is good, and pretty well everybody likes it. We all like prosperity. And when a country, when a city, when a neighborhood, when a family is wealthy, it tends to generate all sorts of other goods, or it makes other goods, other things that are good, easy to attain. It's easier to be healthy when you're prosperous. It's easier to become educated if you're prosperous. If a country is prosperous, it can afford, fine roads and excellent school systems and quality hospitals. The trouble we get into is we start to think that, so prosperity is the precondition for all of these other things. And we start to get a bit confused, and we start to think, so prosperity is really the only good we want. We just need to promote prosperity. And so this is when we fall into the trap of we only talk about growing the economy. We only talk about labor market demands and job skills. And we start to think that prosperity is the only thing that matters. And then we start to think that things only have value. They only have value if they grow the economy, if they produce prosperity. So if you want to make an argument for like a new theater, well, what's the argument for a new theater? It can't be that, well, theater is good and art is beautiful and plays will make people think. Those aren't effective arguments, right? What we need to know is, okay, well, the new theater will grow the tourism economy. Oh, okay, all right, good, prosperity. You want a museum? Yeah, because we want to preserve our history, and we want to educate young people about things that happened in the past. Yeah, okay, well, building the museum will produce construction jobs, and that will boost the economy. Awesome, we're on board. And look, no one is arguing that prosperity is bad. Of course, prosperity is good, but it is not the only human good. And there are some things that are good, even though we can't assign them a cash value. I just realized I've been doing this whole video in the Eagles hoodie. It was mostly so I could make the joke about training camp. It wasn't even that great a joke. Maybe I would be taken more seriously in the shirt and tie. I don't know. Let's find out. And let's talk about the cost for a minute, because this is really the problem, right? The reason why people get so agitated about the liberal arts is the sticker price, the cost of higher education. And so our kind of cultural position is, don't waste your money on that. Spend it on something that will get you a high-paying job. But the actual argument is, this education should not be so expensive for students. It should be accessible to everyone, and it should be publicly funded. Maybe it should be completely free. Maybe people should pay some tuition. But it's definitely not good policy to saddle young people with crippling debt just because they want to pursue an education. And especially if it's the case that learning about this stuff, about ethics and politics and history, is fundamental to the functioning of our democracy. We can't allow only the wealthy to have access to this stuff. Here's the most important reason to study the liberal arts. 2 things I know about all of you is you've got a human life to live, and you're here for a limited time. You've got to figure out what to do with your time. What are you going to do with your life? And that it's a difficult question. And it's one that hopefully you revisit all the time. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? What are you going to do with your time? And there's probably lots of ways to figure this out. But in my experience, reading great books, talking about them with our peers, this is one of the best pathways to thinking about, who you are and what you want to be and what you want to be about, what you want to contribute. The liberal arts give you space to think about the meaning of your life. to think about the meaning of human life writ large. And I don't know how to put a dollar amount on that. That is among the most valuable things that you can have, space and time to think about that. And part of what I'm coming to realize is that this channel is sort of about that. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here, to provide space in the middle of your day for you to think about this stuff. And if you haven't had the opportunity, or you haven't had the opportunity lately to think about this stuff, here we are. We can think about it together right now. If you want to see how that might work, I recommend you watch this video over here on mortality. I will see you there, and I'll talk to you soon.